Okay, let's get this straight. So you're telling me that guys that can level mountains, summon giant monsters, in some cases literally throw meteors out the sky, they're still bowing down to men who have robes that can't even hold a kunai straight? It sounds pretty insane when you frame it that way, right? But here's the thing. In the world of Naruto, the shinobi world, they have always answered to the Feudal Lords, even back during the Warring States era. And in Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, this is coming back into the story in a major way. We're finally getting politics involved in the Naruto universe in a meaningful way. In chapter 26, we learn that the Feudal Lord of the Land of Fire is questioning if shinobi are even necessary once Jura gets dealt with. His aide Kobu even corners Shikamaru with this information. So a lot of you guys have been asking, why don't ninja just flip the table and overthrow these so-called lords? After all, you got people in the village who have god levels of power. So join me in today's newest Naruto Explained video where your OBC, your original Boruto chief, dives deep into the history, the politics, and the culture to explain to you why the strongest warriors in the Naruto world never bite the hand that feeds them, and with that hand being the Feudal Lord, and why your fan suggestion to just overthrow the Feudal Lord is not as simple as you guys are making it out to be. So in order to understand this, we have to take a look at the historical parallels to ancient Japan and look at how Kishimoto took inspiration from it to get a firm understanding of them and how he mixed and matched various aspects from each of them to form the Hokage position and the Feudal Lord position. Because if you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you know that Naruto does not beat for beat copy things from Japan, whether it be folklore or Shinto inspirations or Buddhism inspirations, or in this case, historical inspirations. It always puts its own twist onto it for its world building. So we'll unpack this and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of why they don't just overthrow the Feudal Lord. So the historical parallels to Japan, they're there if you know what to look for. So to understand this, let's look at Japan's own history. Naruto's Feudal Lords are molded after a mix of the Emperor and the daimyo. The Emperor was symbolic, the figurehead ruler slash the head of state. They added legitimacy to the Shogun. That's the person that commanded the military, but depending on the time period, the Shogun typically came from an aristocratic family and did not have direct power over the warrior government, which is why they would have regents like the Hojo family. But Kishimoto obviously excluded that part, unless you want to say count the elders as being regents, which you could, but I personally don't. Instead, Kishimoto just went with the most simplistic version of a shogun to model the Hokage after. It was a mutually beneficial relationship between the two. Even though the shogun was the one that ruled with an iron hand, like we saw in Japan during various time periods, and this ultimately led to the Meiji Restoration era after the Boshin Wars, which happens to be the era and the storylines that my favorite manga, Rurouni Kenshin, is set in, and it deals with the historical and cultural changes in the era, but it's applied to a fictional world. Cheap plug for Kenshin because I love that series. However, it should be noted that to us, we might boil it down to the emperor is just a ceremonial role, but it should be worth noting that rituals and ceremonies during that era of Japan is how a lot of governance was done. At one point in time, for about 200 years, Japan followed the Tang system, where the emperor owned all the land and gave it to families, where they'd all pay taxes, which is where Kishimoto took some of the inspiration from, while blending in other aspects of the other roles. Naruto took several aspects of Japanese history from the Kamakura and Muromachi Shogun eras to the Nara era to the Edo era and the Meiji era, and he rolled them together in a world that Kishimoto flat out tells us that Naruto in part 1 is set a few years before present day. So Naruto part 1 would be in the mid-90s. The daimyo control land and resources. Again, everyone played a role in this beneficial situation. So with the model that Naruto used, it took aspects of all three and it gave it to the Feudal Lord. The figurehead role of the Emperor, the overall authority of the Shogun, and the wealth and resources of the daimyo. Whereas the Hokage kept the military control part that you get with the Shogun role. but not the overall iron grip authority for the nation, which in the Naruto world building, it transferred that to the Feudal Lord. Even now, notice how there is a ceremony that is done to pick the next Hokage, where the Jonin Council gets together and they have their formality vote, but it's the Feudal Lord who says, I approve or disapprove. Notice how ceremonies are done to make the appointed Hokage official. That's where the idea came from. Depending on the time period, ceremonies were done with emperors and the shogun in order to prevent a loss of confidence from the public when it comes to the government. In Naruto, this system, it gets mashed together. Each of the 5 nations and even the smaller nations, they have a feudal lord who controls the land, money, and the politics. Whereas the Hokage and the Kage and village leaders, they all function like shogun. They lead the military. That's basically their only job. Here's the kicker. Even someone as powerful as Hashirama Senju, the man who could literally reshape landscape and kept several of the Biju as his house pets, he still needed the Feudal Lord's blessing when it came to creating the Hidden Leaf Village. The position of Hokage itself wasn't just born out of clan politics. It was demanded by the Feudal Lord to keep things orderly. Once Hashirama and Madara came together, shook hands, and said, let's form this village. If you go back in Naruto's manga, it's the Feudal Lord who tells Hashirama, yeah, I need a village leader if you're going to do this. That's when Hashirama goes to Madara and talks about the Hokage position. From day one, shinobi villages, they were legitimized through federal authority, not outside of it, and that precedent is stuck. This goes into the power of the daimyo in the Naruto world. Daimyo are not fighter, but instead they hold the purse strings. They decide alliances, the budget, and they even approve the appointment of the brand new Kage. They'll even suggest it, and once they suggest it, that's pretty much it. Look at how Danzo had a brief claim as 6th Hokage. He was a candidate who was approved by the Feudal Lord when Danzo made his case. And even though people like Shikamaru's father did not like it, they had to swallow it. And had Danzo lived and say never screwed up the 5 Kage summit, the only thing he could do is vote yes or no on the formality vote. At the end of the day, Danzo would have been 6th Hokage. Because the Feudal Lord approved it, they're not going against the Feudal Lord. It's called pecking order. Basically, without approval from the Feudal Lord, there is no official Hokage. Again, the Jonin Council vote is a formality. During the 4th Great Ninja War, if you pay attention to how everything was done, the Feudal Lords, they were being guarded like VIPs because it was their financial support, which we learn in Gara Hiden, a Sandstorm Mirage, a Naruto epilogue novel written by the former writer of Boruto, Ukyo Kodachi. That financial support kept the allied shinobi forces running. The Feudal Lords are the ones who paid for all that mobilization and clearing out all those small countries in order to have them serve as battlefields. They didn't just pick any random empty spot. They cleared out entire places. Running a war is not cheap. That is why Obito and Kabuto, they plotted to kidnap the Feudal Lords, because using the Feudal Lords as hostages meant holding the entire war effort hostage. It would give them leverage to try to demand, hey, we want the Jinchuriki, or at least force the Kage into a uncomfortable situation, because if they have hostages, they have to be careful about how they go about it in terms of how they want to fight back. Economically, shinobi villages, they have never produced enough money to sustain themselves. They survived off of clients hiring them for missions, and the Feudal Lord basically wrote a check in order to cover all the other costs. Think of it like shinobi villages were constantly running in the red, which for those of you guys who don't run a business, being in the red means that you're losing money. When you're in the black, that means that you're turning a profit. I'll use a real life example in order to explain the Feudal Lord situation. My Naruto Explained channel turns a very healthy profit. Even after spending $500 a month on custom drawn thumbnails that you see, and the 4 to 8 videos and the 30 to 50 shorts that do not get uploaded on the channel that I'm saving to hopefully start another set of uploads like you saw April and May and part of June. Editors are running a little bit behind, but the other 2 anime channels, In the case of Anime Explained, barely breaks even depending on the month that we're in. And a lot of the traffic comes from casual viewers that find the older videos, which for aspiring content creators, evergreen content is your best friend. A video might blow up 6 months to a year later. I'll clear anywhere between $300 to $1,000 on about 287,000 views last month, and a few months back, like we were at like 500, 600,000 views. That channel has a high RPM, so I can afford to take some money from Naruto Explained and do what the Feudal Lord does. Say, how about I subsidize a channel and maybe I make the money back. Maybe it takes a long time to make the money back. Just like it's taking a long time for the shinobi villages to be able to stand up on their own. With that One Piece channel, between the thumbnails and say I do 2 to 3 explain videos each month, that's $300, $400 that I'm not making that money back on, because that's still a channel that is growing. Just like a Ninja Village is still growing economically. That's basically what the Feudal Lord is doing in Naruto. He just kept investing in the shinobi village for a hope of return on investment, and also for the military protection that the ninja village provides. And in exchange, the ninja village and all the smaller villages in the Land of Fire and just in every nation, they get a place that they get to call their own, but they also have to pay taxes on where they live. In Boruto's modern era, mission requests, they're dropping. But you do have peace that is stable. The war economy, that's gone. The villages are not at cold war with each other anymore. That is why shinobi careers are practically optional now. No missions, no income. Villages, they will collapse without the daimyo support. That is why Kobu, given the Feudal Lord's threat, is so huge. This is why when Shikamaru hears about budget cuts, he goes, hold on a second. He's got my balls in his hand. And it's the same with someone as powerful as Naruto in Part 1 of Boruto, and even Gaara's father in Naruto Part 1. When the Feudal Lord cut their budget, he just had to bend over and take it. When you get into the epilogue novels and the Naruto novels that are set in the Boruto era, Kakashi has a few lines where he predicted this very situation coming on later down the line. Which, reading in between the lines, that is why he laid the groundwork for the tech boom that you see in Boruto. Most of it started under Kakashi, the switch to technology, but Naruto got handed over the keys to this figurative car when he became Hokage, and it was his job to keep driving it forward in order to make progress. Even Kakashi knew there might come a time where shinobi are no longer needed. But it's much like how we have with our own servicemen in the US Army. Once they leave, their skills, they aren't always suited for civilian life. And in order to prevent a situation like that, Kakashi was laying the groundwork for a more sustaining economy. But as of where things are right now, 19 years after the Fourth Ninja War, even with Konoha now being the capital of the Land of Fire and the village, it does not earn enough to sustain itself by itself. So this leads to the big question a lot of you guys have asked. Why don't the shinobi just overthrow the Feudal Lord? If ninja are that strong, why don't they just kill the daimyo and just take over? First, tradition. Before the hidden villages, clans, they were nothing more than mercenaries for hire. They weren't even designed to govern nations. They thrived on letting others handle the infrastructure, trade, and economics. They benefited from it. Taking over would have made them easy targets, and culturally, betraying your daimyo, it is complete dishonor. Second, you have geopolitics. Konoha is not the only village in the Land of Fire. People tend to forget that. The Land of Fire isn't the only country in the Naruto world. If one shinobi village murdered its daimyo, other nations, they would stop doing business with them overnight. No trade, no supplies, no food imports, no resources. They would be cut off. You would need every other shinobi village to overthrow their daimyo, which is completely out of character for what you see in the Naruto world. In the Naruto epilogue novels, it is made clear the Land of Fire relies on imports from other nations for minerals and food. You can't just use jutsu to fix that. A strong military dictatorship surrounded by hostile trade partners, it would collapse quickly. The third thing is the simple economics, especially now in this technology-filled world. They have bank accounts now. They have wire transfers and things of that nature just based on where the technology is. You overthrow that feudal lord, all those accounts can get frozen. The daimyo, they control the flow of the money. You cut ties with them and no one's gonna hire your shinobi. Remember, shinobis, they aren't farmers, they aren't blacksmiths. Even going back to the Land of Silence, when Gingo was trying to build up that shinobi village and they were undercutting all the other shinobi villages. If you read the Shikamaru, Hiden, Cloud Drifting and Silent story, there were issues even with that village despite what they're trying to do. And it's for the reason that I laid out for you. Shinobi are specialized soldiers and they rely on trade. Something that we learn again in those Naruto epilogue novels and the ones set in Boruto. The Land of Fire, it can't provide all the resources that not just the Hidden Leaf village, but all the other smaller villages need. Hence, you have trading. Even with the magical elements you have with chakra and say shinobi are willing to learn new skills, they still need outside help for other things. A village without funding essentially becomes nothing more than a bandit camp, and you're back into what it was in the Warring States era where clans did their own thing and they took on jobs to buy materials. But in this case, there wouldn't be anyone willing to do business with you because of the dishonor of what you did by overthrowing the government. Sure, you had a rogue like Madara who dreamed of ruling everything via the infinite Tsukiyomi, a world without winners and losers. But the system itself is designed to push back against anyone who tries to play warlord. That is the world building in Naruto. There are historical consequences and cultural weight as well. In Japanese history, betraying your daimyo, it was the ultimate act of treason. It didn't just make you dishonorable, it also made you radioactive. Other clans, they would not ally with you because if you could betray once, you could also betray again. You would need all the shinobi in the Hidden Leaf village to be okay with what you just did. And just from a practical perspective, that's never going to happen because you're going to have people that are traditionalists who are going to fight against change like that. Even with the Uchiha clan, part of the reason why people give Itachi some of the shit that they give them is that there were members of the clan who did not agree, has supported the Uchiha clan's attempt to do a coup d'etat. Most of them were for the coup d'etat, but not all of them. But with something like this, you're now playing with fire. Everybody has to be united in this. Otherwise, you'll have an Itachi, it takes things into their own hands. The same logic, again, carries over with Naruto. We've seen examples of this in universe. When the Feudal Lord in the Land of Wind outsourced missions to Konoha and was gutting the funding to the Hidden Sand Village, look at what happened. They didn't go directly at the Feudal Lord. Gar's father didn't even try to assassinate him. Instead, he reached out to Orochimaru to make an alliance with him and it backfired. Killing a daimyo isn't just a risk. It's something that carries complete isolation. In a world where trade and alliances mean survival, isolation is basically a death sentence. That is the whole reason why Kisame, who was already a rogue ninja, got a massive bounty put on his head because he killed a feudal lord. In Boruto, for context, that is why Boruto's latest development is so dangerous. With Jura's threat eventually going to be over, the feudal lord is now questioning whether or not shinobi villages are even needed. His aide Kobu is cornering Konoha with this information, trying to use it as leverage while he investigates how Boruto escaped. If the feudal lord cuts shinobi villages out of the system, it's not just about politics, it's about survival. It's about funding. It's about legitimacy. It's about future. This is the perfect reminder that in Naruto, it isn't just about power levels or flashy jutsu. The true balance in the shinobi world, it is always dependent on politics if you read close in between the lines of what we've been introduced to in Naruto's manga and in both Boruto manga. Shinobi might be capable of fighting gods, but they can't fight the system that feeds them. So the next time you wonder, why don't shinobi just crush their feudal lords? Remember, power isn't just about strength. Power is also about money, power, and respect. It's about legitimacy and the traditions that the entire world runs on. Even god-level shinobi like Hashirama and Madara had to play that game. Shikamaru now has to play that game. And even Boruto's generation, for all their power, they're still chained to a system older than the shinobi villages itself. If you found this video informative, click that subscribe button, check out this new video from Naruto Explained, and click here to check out other videos from my other two anime channels that I talked about earlier, where I talk about non-Naruto content.